Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
On a Friday, it's July 3rd, 2026. An early happy 4th of July to all of our listeners this morning, and welcome to a very special Independence Day, well, kind of, close to it, special program for Catholic Connection on this Friday as we move into this most important weekend of our country's history, the 250th anniversary, and of course the big 4th of July celebration. We have a wonderful show for you this morning. We are pre-recorded. This is a special edition, as I mentioned, because our team, of course, has this day off, and I do hope that wherever you are safe and that you are planning some very fun things with your family and with your friends. And most of all, I do hope that you will make it to Mass today and tomorrow and, of course, Sunday, because we have so much for which to be grateful and thankful in this great country of ours. So we have a number of great interviews for you this morning. But before we get to that, I do want to suggest something, to take a look at the words to one of my favorite hymns that's often played this time of year, the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Now, God did not gift me with a singing voice, so I won't be putting you through this, but I would suggest listening to it and really listening closely to the lyrics. It's very powerful, very patriotic hymn, but also a very Christian hymn. And one of my favorite verses happens to be verse 5, "In the beauty of the lilies, Christ was born across the sea, with the glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me. As he died to make men holy, let us die to make men free, while God is marching on." Amen to that. Happy 4th of July, friends. Let's give you a quick rundown. We have a great lineup for you. Sat down with a number of people, including, if you remember, Dr. Stephen White. He's going to be talking to us this first hour about a beautiful program, a new temporary exhibit highlighting St. John Paul II's reflections on the principles inscribed in the founding documents which gave birth to this nation of ours. So it'll be wonderful. He'll give us all the details. And then we're going to be talking to the one, the only Bill Donahue, of course, from the Catholic League to wrap up this first hour. 2 segments with Bill, 2 segments with Dr. White. And Bill is going to be taking a look at religious freedom, taking a look at some of the issues that are affecting our country right now, and just talking about our own roots. So that is the first hour of the program. Hour number 2, another great interview for you. We are going to be talking with Dr. Michael Breidenbach, and we're going to be talking about America at 250, looking at our birthday, as well as a history of religious liberties. This is a very patriotic show today. I think you're really going to enjoy it. And then last but not least, thinking of patriotism, how about practicing that at home? Carrie Gress, she's an amazing teacher and speaker in the Catholic faith, and she's an author also, and she has a beautiful magazine and a beautiful ministry dedicated to getting back to the basics and bringing theology to the home. And she's done a terrific job of putting together a summary of ideas, recipes, history of the flag, how to display Old Glory. I mean, it's just amazing what she has done with this segment. So that's a look at the hour today, or first hour and second hour, I should say, on a Friday morning. Again, it is July 3rd, and we are welcoming you to this very special edition of Catholic Connection. So we will get started with our interviews, and I hope you have a beautiful 4th of July weekend. Great to have Stephen White back with us again here on Catholic Connection, especially for such a patriotic day and weekend and show. So much to discuss. Stephen began his tenure as executive director of the St. John Paul II National Shrine earlier this year. Prior to his arrival at the shrine, he served for 7 years as executive director of the Catholic Project at the Catholic University of America, where, among other things, he oversaw the groundbreaking national study of Catholic priests and produced the award-winning podcast Crisis, Clergy Abuse in the Catholic Church. He has a very distinguished resume, but in order so we have as much time with him as possible, we'll get right to it. Stephen, happy early 4th of July, and so excited to talk to you about this exhibit related to Pope St. John Paul II. Great to hear from you again. Thanks for being on the program. Tell us about this new temporary exhibit highlighting St. John Paul II's reflections on the principles of the founding documents. How did this come about, first of all?
Yeah, well, we wanted to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States. But being a shrine dedicated to Pope John Paul II, we went back and looked at the various things that he had said during his visits to the United States, but also to American leaders when he met with them overseas, to see what John Paul II had to say about America and about the American founding in particular. And there's actually a lot there. There's a lot to be discovered and uncovered. His reflections on America, over the 8 trips he took to the United States through his life, including many of them as Pope, he often reflected on what it means what America means both to the American people in this experiment in ordered liberty, but also to the rest of the world. And so we wanted to be able to present that to our visitors in a way that sort of really unpacks some of the really interesting things that John Paul II had to say about the United States, but also to get sort of a personal sense by including sort of artifacts and images from his visits here. It's neat to go to see a place where you're from and to see Pope John Paul II visiting that. I didn't see him when he came to Chicago in 1979, for example, but my dad was there. My brother was there. So it was neat to be able to see images from those visits from places that I know where I grew up. So both the intellectual side, so really seeing what he had to say about the United States and the importance of our understanding of freedom for ourselves and for the rest of the world, but also then to see it sort of in the context of the places that we know and love was really cool.
Yeah, I would love to see this because I covered him as a reporter, first in radio when he came to Detroit when I was still doing radio news, and then later when he came to the East Coast, New York City, and went up and down the coast. I was at both events covering it as a reporter, and it was just phenomenal, and I'll never forget it as long as I live. So if you wouldn't mind, give us the dates of this special exhibit, New Birth of Freedom, St. John Paul II in the United States of America, and kind of walk us through, Stephen, if you would.
Yeah, so it opened at the beginning of this month, at the beginning of June. It will stay open at least through August 9th. We're discussing the possibility of extending it further so that more people can come and see it. But as of right now, it's up through at least the 9th of August. But as I said, sort of half of the exhibit looks at the words of John Paul II, specifically pertaining to America and the American founding. The promise, both for Americans and for the rest of the world, of the Declaration of Independence and what that accomplished. I think it's easy for us 250 years later to see it as sort of the success of that project, the success of the Declaration of Independence as something inevitable because it happened. But it was really a near-run thing, and I think one thing that Pope John Paul II draws our attention to is to the fragility, the promise, but also the fragility of freedom. It's not something that can be taken for granted. It's not something that because we won it once in the past, that guarantees it forever in the future. It requires people who are dedicated to certain virtues, who have an understanding of the contingency of freedom, that if we don't use it well, if we use it selfishly, that it becomes no kind of freedom at all. But as he would put it, that true freedom is always tied to the truth. And so that we have a kind of vocation as Americans to live our freedom well for our own sake, but also for the sake of future generations. So half of the exhibit really looks at that, and the rest looks at his visits to the United States.
So are there videos or film clips, or is it is it interactive, or what will it be like walking through?
Yeah, so we have panels detailing all of the things that he said. There's some audio clips you can hear him. I believe the audio clip we have playing is from a visit he made to Battery Park in New York, in Manhattan. You'll see artifacts from his visits, so tchotchkes from the 70s and 80s in a lot of cases, Pope masks and bumper stickers, maps of where he visited. You'll see artifacts like gifts that were presented to him from presidents of the United States. There's some pretty interesting things from a number of different presidents that we have from our own collection. And then things like we have a chair that he used during his visit. I think it was in 1979 when he came to give us a talk at Catholic University, which is right across the street from where we are. And so it was the chair that he used there. There's a kind of a funny story behind that. That chair apparently was just sort of pulled from someone's office to be used for the occasion, and in one afternoon it went from just a chair in someone's office to a relic that's now taken up residency in our permanent collection here. So there was a lot of work going back, not only to tell the story of John Paul II and his reflections on America, and to tell the story of his visits and what he focused on during those visits, but also to go through our own collections here at the Shrine and pull out these artifacts that we've had for many years to help sort of fill in some of the color and the interest of what was like to visit. One interesting tidbit, people who wanted to hear the Pope, they could go see him in person if that was a possibility, but you could also, in a lot of the cases, you could buy a record, a vinyl record of the recordings of his speeches. So we have some of those on display. Yeah, it's sort of a very different time in the 70s and 80s. But it's really delightful, and I hope people will enjoy it when they come to visit.
Well, I would imagine, knowing as much as we do, because if you're about my age, maybe a little younger, but remembering him so well and how much freedom meant to him, considering what he went through in terms of being from Poland and everything he knew about World War II and what he had seen. So being able to really dive into the documents and studying, as he always did when he made a trip abroad, it must have been very moving for him. And the phrase "a new birth of freedom" he took that originally from Lincoln, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. What you say about his experience as a Pole is really important. Not only did he experience, he was born during the Second Polish Republic that followed the First World War and didn't last very long, right? The Second World War put an end to that. But there had been another Polish Republic before that, started shortly after the American founding. And that didn't last very long either. So he understood really the precariousness of freedom. It's not a given that just because you win one political victory or you establish one kind of government that it will last and endure. And so as a Pole, knowing his history, but also his lived experience with totalitarianism through the 20th century, he really understood just how precious America's experience of freedom was, both, of course, for the American people, but also for everyone else. The world looks to the United States, and I think still does, as an example that this is an experiment that can work. It's not inevitable that it will work, but it can, and it requires a real sort of sense of gratitude, first of all, for what we have, but also a willingness to live the kinds of lives that will preserve that freedom for us and for other people. And that's something the church has a lot to say about, not just John Paul II, but a lot to say about what does human freedom mean, how do we live it well, how do we preserve it for ourselves and for others.
Talking with Stephen White, Executive Director of the JP2 National Shrine in our nation's capital, and we're discussing specifically a beautiful exhibit, A New Birth of Freedom, St. John Paul II and the United States of America. So have you been seeing an increase in visitors, given all the activities that we've had, especially leading up to this big weekend for the 4th of July, and the interest with all the different events going on and all the momentum? I mean, there's so much talk about the United States of America, people coming from all over the world here for, parts of the World Cup. What are you hearing and seeing in terms of busyness in D.C. and attendance, and what are you hoping for before we take a break?
Yeah, well, I'm excited for all the visitors we've had and for all that will are yet to come. One other thing that happened that sort of fell into our lap just in last week, so we had to hurry to get it up. The major relics of St. Margaret Mary Alacoque, the apostle of the Sacred Heart, are here at the shrine right now and will be here through the 4th of July. So people who come can venerate her relics. They can venerate the first-class relics of Pope John Paul II. And so
wow. Okay, let's take a break and pick
others.
This up on the other side, because that's huge, and an opportunity through tomorrow to check that out for July 4th. And, of course, this exhibit will be on for a little while in August. We'll be right back. Wishing you a beautiful 4th of July weekend on this July 3rd, 2026, a very special edition of Catholic Connection. For this beautiful holiday and anniversary of our nation, on the phone with us, or I should say online with us, is Stephen White, the Executive Director of the beautiful JP2 Shrine in D.C. We're talking about A New Birth of Freedom, St. John Paul II and the United States of America. The St. John Paul II National Shrine celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence with this new temporary exhibit highlighting St. John Paul II's reflections on the principles inscribed in the founding documents which gave birth to a new nation, the United States of America. Now, as Stephen mentioned in the previous segment, but if you're just joining us, The exhibit includes photos, artifacts, memorabilia from his 7 visits to the U.S., including his pre-papal trip to multiple cities, including Philadelphia, all the way back in 1979. The materials including items from the Shrine's museum collection and digital loans sent by dioceses, museums, and universities from across the country. So, Stephen, how long did it take you to collect all of these different items for this beautiful exhibit?
Well, the work on this exhibit began before I even arrived at the Shrine in March. So the idea was laid down. First, you had to work out sort of what story do we want to tell and how do we want to tell it. And then once that sort of script, as it were, is laid out, our team at Mission and Ministry, led by Dr. Grattan Brown, fantastic work. They went through and went through our own archives to pick out the artifacts that would help tell this story, and then reached out to dioceses and other institutions around the country to see if they had any artifacts or assets, including digital photographs that they had rights to and things like that we could incorporate into the exhibit. We even had a gift of a loan of a photograph from the Scalia family of Pope John Paul II meeting the Scalias. So it was really a collaborative effort. Great job from our mission and ministry team, and I think people will really enjoy it.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely wonderful. So I know that you also wanted to mention, and you started to mention it before the break, some other special relics that people can venerate.
Yeah, the major relics of St. Margaret Mary Alacoque, the apostle of the Sacred Heart, are here at the Shrine through the 4th of July. So there's if you're in the D.C. area, if you haven't been already, swing by and you'll have a chance to venerate those relics before they move on to Baltimore and then back on up to New Haven. Of course, we have the first-class relic of Pope John Paul II for veneration. So it's a shrine first and foremost. So it's a great place to come and encounter the saints, and through them encounter our Lord. And we hope that people will make the time during the busy festival weekend to come down and pay us a visit.
Has the interest, given all the publicity for the 250th and all the things leading up to this week, and of course, as I mentioned, this weekend, are you finding more people interested in coming to the Shrine?
Yeah, it's been really wonderful to hear from people. It's kind of funny, even from friends of mine who hear about the Shrine through Catholic media or some of our new exhibits, and they'll get in touch. This sounds great. I got to make sure to get down there. Can I get a VIP tour? Well, we'll see. But yeah, there's been some great buzz, and we're looking forward to welcoming everybody to the Shrine.
In terms of the age group, I'm sure this is appropriate for all ages, obviously, but would you like more young people to see it, or baby boomers, those of us who remember JP2? What's on your mind for the audience, do you think?
Well, there really are those two audiences. I think there's the people who remember John Paul II and love sort of being reminded of him and his legacy. I'm sort of on the young end of what we call the John Paul II generation. And I think so for those folks, that this is a real chance to remember what was so great and special about him and his pontificate. For younger people who don't know him and don't remember his pontificate, I think this exhibit in particular, but also our permanent exhibit in the lower level, is a great chance to meet him, to really find out what was so remarkable about this man, about this life. To get to know him, not just his sort of towering intellectual legacy or his magisterial legacy or his sort of role in world history, but to see what made him holy. What made him so attractive was he lived his life in a way that he was transparent to Christ. People met him, and through him came to know our Lord better. I think ultimately that was what made him great. That's why we consider him a saint. It was because of that holiness and that example of what it means to be a radically converted disciple of Christ. So I think for younger people, who a lot of them, their sort of expectations for what a pope is and what a pope does, I think there's a chance for them to learn how much of that comes from the example of Pope John Paul II, how he transformed the office of the papacy in a lot of ways, with his world travels, with his engagement with young people, his founding of World Youth Day. All of that comes from his pontificate. And so for young people who don't know him as well, or don't remember him, this is a great opportunity for them to sort of dip into the waters and discover a really, truly remarkable life who transformed the church and the world in some remarkable ways not that long ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking with Stephen White, Executive Director of the St. John Paul II National Shrine. More specifically, because obviously of this season in which we're in, with 4th of July coming up tomorrow, we have a special edition of Catholic Connection this morning. We're talking about a new birth of freedom, St. John Paul II and the United States of America. It's a beautiful exhibit at the Shrine. I wanted to share something with you, and you said introducing young people to him, so I decided to try and do that last week. Hopefully it made an impression. I spoke at the EWTN Academy, which is for young professionals. It's pursuing media, Catholic media in particular, and also some of them are already graduated from college. Most are still in college, but these quotes, Stephen, I think really summarize, even I think connected in some way, even though you may not have these quotes involved, but some way to his heart and who he is and how he understood the importance of freedom and truth and evangelization, especially through the media. He said this was to the United Nations before he wrapped up his trip in 1979, thanking the journalists, "Be faithful to the truth and to its transmission. For truth endures, truth will not go away, truth will not pass or change. And I say to you, take it as my parting words to you, that the service of truth, the service of humanity through the medium of truth, is something worthy of your best years, your finest talents, your most dedicated efforts." And he wraps it up by saying, "As transmitters of truth, you are instruments of understanding among people and of peace among nations." I read that in a journalism magazine as a journalism student at that time. I cut it out. It's still at my home studio. It's also at my office here in Italy, and I look at it all the time to remind me of what I'm supposed to be doing. But he just seems to get and understand things at a different level, don't you think?
Yeah, he had a great sense of the adventure, I think, of what it means to be a Christian disciple, right? That what is asked of us is not necessarily easy, but it's dramatic and ultimately rewarding. Whether that is in a particular vocation, like in a journalist, or fatherhood, or in the priesthood, or family life. He had a real understanding that people want to be called to more. They don't want to be made comfortable. I think sometimes we think we do, but what he had a real insight, especially with young people, that if you ask more of them and encourage them and give them the tools along the way, they'll rise to tremendous things. And I think he not only spoke beautifully about that, about the sort of the height of the human vocation, but also was an example of it. And so I think for young people especially, he is a great source of inspiration, both in his words, but also in his example.
Yeah, it must be exciting for you to be there and to have the opportunity to see up close and personal all these different items that represent his incredible life.
Yeah, it's there's something wonderful about being able to see and hold and touch, artifacts from parts of history that I remember or that I've seen and heard about. This isn't just the case for things having to do with John Paul II. I mean, everybody loves a nice artifact or a memory of some time long past. But to be able to have so much of that here at the shrine, so much of it for people to see, being the executive director, I have privileges and get to go in to see our own collections in a way that most people don't. But it really is remarkable and very special. And I hope lots of people will come down, as I said earlier, to get to know John Paul II and through him to meet our Lord. That's what this place is for, and hopefully all of our work is really helping to bring that across.
And again, it runs through. How long is it going to be at the shrine?
The new exhibit will be open through August 9th at least. We're thinking about extending it beyond that to meet increased demand. But yeah, August 9th, between now and August 9th, you can be sure to find it here at the John Paul Shrine.
Awesome. Well, happy 4th of July to you, our friend Stephen White from the beautiful jp2shrine.org. And again, through August 9th, this wonderful exhibit, A New Birth of Freedom, St. John Paul II and the United States of America. jp2shrine.org, the initial JP, the number 2, shrine.org. We'll be right back. What an amazing weekend. It is Friday, July 3rd. A lot of folks have the day off for the holiday tomorrow. God bless this great country, United States of America, 250 years, all kinds of celebrations going on, including with our dear friend, Dr. Bill Donahue, fearless leader of the Catholic League, author, speaker, and an amazing brother in the Lord. Bill, let me be among the many to wish you a beautiful 4th of July. God bless America. How are you, my friend?
Oh, yes, and God bless you and all of your listeners. This is a wonderful time in America.
Isn't it interesting? I know we're going to talk about your billboard in Times Square and some of the other wonderful posts that you have on your website and social media about this big weekend. But we were talking in preparation for this interview that you have so many people coming over for the World Cup from all over the world. They are raving about Americans, about our food, about our places, the beauty. They are just raving about it. And so many people on the left are upset about the fact that they're having a great time in this country. How does that make any sense?
Yeah, I saw this when I was a college professor, and when Ronald Reagan won in 1980, I came on the campus, and you would think you were in a funeral parlor. All these professors, they're so dark, and they're looking down, and they're unhappy. They were so upset that Reagan won, and he won easily. And then when he won even easier in '84, wow, you really thought that you're in a dungeon. There are people, and professors tend to be among the worst. And I don't mean all of them, obviously, but too many of them. They do kind of wallow in negativity. They look at the dark side, and I think there's a reason for that. It's a way of morally uplifting themselves, because what they're saying is that it's too bad most Americans are so stupid. They're not brilliant like the way we are, and they come to the realization that this is not a country to celebrate anything, but we see it, and we're unusual. It's kind of a Gnostic quality to them. They have this little secret that no one else can share, and it's a sad way to live. And by the way, so many of them live their own lives that are a total mess, which is very interesting if you look at how they project. But look. So you're never going to get rid of these people. And too many of them are in the professoriate, and they do affect other people, the young people with their thinking. They don't seem to understand that, if you're going to talk about America's dark side, good, let's do it. The same is true of individuals. I don't have the time to go into right now, but one person who's an American, who's a tremendous American, who made incredible contributions to our society, had a terribly flawed personal life. I'm talking about Martin Luther King, a terribly flawed Martin. Does that take away from? No, you put it in balance. Yes, we had slavery. The whole rest of the world, by the way, had slavery. The only country in the entire world in the late 18th century that didn't have slavery was England. It was Britain. So, no, we can talk about that and why it's been so common and the like. But, if you just want to focus in on the dark side of good nations or the dark side of good people like Martin Luther King. The reason I bring him up is because would that be fair to just focus in on Martin Luther King Day on his dark side? Of course not. We're celebrating the good things that he did, and we're celebrating the good things that America has done, which is why people want to keep coming here. But it's an unfair perception, and it's being driven by people like Time Magazine and Washington Post. They've got all kinds of articles reminding America, remember, you've got a dark side. Well, guess what? When Hitler came into power, who wrote some very nice pieces about him? Washington Post, New York Times, Time Magazine. Oh, yeah, this is undisputable. So I don't need lectures when people have their own dark side, if we want to harp on that. I mean, how dark can we get that you're so obsessed and fixated on this? They really are upset that Americans are so happy to celebrate, and people are celebrating, like you rightfully said. People who are in this country right now in the World Cup, yeah, they're celebrating America. Too bad the professoriate can't get along with it.
But also the media, as you mentioned, Bill. And by the way, if you're just joining us on this Friday, July 3rd, chatting with a regular guest, a wonderful guest, Dr. Bill Donahue, a sociologist, best-selling author, speaker, president of the Catholic League. You see the media criticizing those people coming here for the World Cup and just loving everything about our country, as I mentioned earlier. But at the same time, they talk about how bad the country is, and don't forget slavery, don't forget our dark side. Then why are they so pro-immigration? That makes no sense, because if this is such a horrible place and we're so horrible, why do you want open borders? Why don't you want more reasonable controls, as our catechism teaches and gives us that opportunity? There's such a disconnect there.
Well, in the case of the more extreme elements, I don't know if there is a disconnect. What they really want is illegal immigration. Why would they want that?
That makes sense.
If you get enough people on the dole, that you have to pay. You have to, when you vote, you're not going to vote against the person who's feeding you. I mean, the Democrats know this. I mean, if you take a look in this country on all the people who are on the dole or who are working for the government, in one way or another. How hard can it be? I mean, you if you wanted to vote for somebody other than a Democrat, you're voting against your own economic interest, and they understand that. So we're not talking here about legal migration to this country. The people on the left, they want the illegals to come in, and then when they're here illegally, they don't want ICE to arrest them. It's just the same people who want to open up the borders are the same people who don't want them arrested because they don't have the best interest of America in mind. Now there's a minority of them, but they're a powerful minority, and they're funded by the likes of Singham and Soros and the others, and some of the foundations. Yeah, there's a tight network of these people. But they don't have the best interest of America in mind, and I say that regrettably because the average person, of course, is a good American, but I don't think the average American understands how deep this is. There's a hatred of this country, and these people are well heeled.
And they're not really concerned about the illegal immigrants coming in. They want them here for their own selfish purposes, because I don't see them embracing them when they come into their own backyard. We talked about this, I think, a few months ago, what happened with Martha's Vineyard when some of the immigrants were sent there. They were all about kicking them out.
Well, isn't that always the case? It's just like the people who say defund the police. They live in gated communities. They have their own drivers.
Armed guards and everything else.
Their own security.
Yeah.
I mean, Ilhan Omar, all these. Take a look at the mayor of New York City, Mayor Mamdani. I have police friends of mine who have told me, and some of them don't even know each other as police. So these are independent anecdotes that I'm getting. They've told me that he insists on the top flight police protection for himself. Meanwhile, he was associated with the defund the police and abolish the prisons. That's what he said at one time. He's got to move back from that. But you want to abolish the prisons and you want to get rid of the police, but yet you demand extra protection for yourself? See, this is the thing that drives the average patriotic American crazy. What is going on here with these democratic socialists? Mamdani has been working with the Democratic Socialists to get rid of the Democrats, the incumbent Democrats. That's just how far they've gone. And by the way, the idea of democratic socialists is an oxymoron. There's nothing democratic about socialism as we've seen in history.
Well, they put it in front to make it sound like we're talking democracy and that we're going to treat people fairly. Let's talk a little bit about the celebration. What are you celebrating this weekend? When we come back, I want to highlight what you're so proud of to be an American. I'll share my thoughts as well. We both come from immigrant families. You're an Irish American. I'm an Italian American. Our families worked very, very hard to come here and to stay here. So much to celebrate this weekend. God bless the United States of America. Happy 250th. We'll be right back. Wishing you a blessed and a beautiful and a safe 4th of July weekend, 250th anniversary. This is a big celebration for the United States of America. God bless America. And all those in the military who have fought for this country and for the freedom for Bill and I to speak on the radio. The First Amendment, freedom of the press, all of that has been a gift that has been handed down to us from our founding fathers and all the men and women who fought for this great country of ours. So, Bill, I'll go to you first, then I'll add my 2 cents. What are you most excited about for 250 years? What does it mean to you personally and your family?
Well, I come from a family of immigrants. I was raised by my Irish grandparents, all in law enforcement, typical Irish kind of stock. I'm a veteran myself, served during the Vietnam War period, and thank you. And there's so much. I think when you just mentioned the First Amendment, now that was 1791. We had in 1788, we had the Constitution was ratified, and of course 1776, the Declaration. Yeah, I would say the Constitution is so important because without the Constitution, you don't have federalism, federal, state, local government. You don't have separation of powers. You don't have the executive, legislative, and judicial branches all balancing each other, working that way intentionally. So that's important. But our founding document, the Declaration, written by Jefferson, talks about the inalienable rights of people. Now, that we didn't have inalienable rights for everybody at that time. Obviously, we had slavery. But he put in motion that in the Constitution in 1808, the Atlantic slave trade would disappear. And he was the president at that time, and he made it disappear. The point is this: we couldn't have had a union at that time if we insisted on abolishing slavery then, which was a common institution all over the world. So I'm not trying to justify it, but people like Aristotle just couldn't even envision a society without it. It just seemed to be the norm as such. But the Declaration was what inspired Martin Luther King, for example. He said, listen, these rights there that are inalienable, they have not been delivered yet, but we have a declaration which provides the framework, and we're going to capitalize on that. And he made good on that promise. And I love in 1791, December the 15th, we had the Bill of Rights. The First Amendment, of course, freedom of religion, the first freedom. That's the first one mentioned. And, of course, freedom of the press, assembly, the right to freedom of the press, to petition grievances against our government. Yeah, that makes me very proud, because without religious freedom and freedom of speech in particular, you can't have a free society. And it's been threatened. It's being threatened today by many on the left, which is why I commend President Trump for the Religious Liberty Commission and their fine report, which the Catholic League played a major role in contributing a trove of documents to them. And I commend all the men and women who served on that commission. Now, we have a lot to be proud of in this country. And you know, it's not a matter of just wearing your Americanism on your sleeve. We're saying, listen, yeah, we can do better, and we have done better with different segments of the population, but I don't compare America to some utopia on a professor's blackboard. I compare America historically. What were other countries like in the past? What were we like in the past? And look at cross-culturally today. Let's take the status of women. Let's take the status of minorities. Let's take the status of the poor. Let's compare the United States with those groups to other countries in Africa, in Latin America, in the Middle East, in China, in Japan, in Russia, throughout Europe. Guess what? We come out very well. So that's a realistic index, cross-cultural and historical, and not some pie-in-the-sky blackboard game that is played by some malcontent professor.
I thought it was very eye-opening to see so many people coming over, and we were talking about this in the previous segment for the World Cup, and literally saying on their TikTok videos and other social media outlets, we've been lied to about America, and raving about the people, how kind they were to them, how welcome they felt in all these different states that are hosting different events and or watching parties, different types of gatherings going on. I think that says so much, and they're talking about how beautiful the country is, how warm everyone is, and I'm so proud that they're having such a great time, because I would say the vast majority of Americans, we are welcoming, we are loving and kind.
Absolutely, and the people who are, again, on the dark side, what exactly do they want? I mean, is there a nation that they should say that they're going to recognize that we should emulate? Would that be North Korea, maybe? China? How about Iran? Do they like those countries? I mean, it's amazing. They keep saying they're going to leave this country and go someplace else, but they always seem to stay, with the exception of Rosie O'Donnell.
Exactly. I have to give her credit. At least she put her money where her mouth is and went over to Ireland. I feel sorry for your fellow Irishman over there, but Yeah,
the others keep whetting our appetite and keep teasing us. They say they're ready to, I thought their bags have been packed now for years, but they still keep hanging around. We know why they're hanging around, too, because the greatest freedom, the greatest prosperity that exists is right here. And if you like you mentioned these people coming over here for the World Cup, they made their decision about America based on real life experiences.
Exactly.
They didn't make it on the basis of a book that somebody wrote because he's got an animus against American society and he wants a Marxist kind of an outcome. That's usually always the case here. No, when you ask people who had real life experiences, that contrasts very sharply with those people who will give you the propaganda, the Howard Zinn kind of understanding of American history, which is a package of lies and half-truths woven together and then sold to unsuspecting students. If I just walked into a classroom and all I did was talk about the negative things about any individual, people would say, is there anything good to say about that person? Or do the same thing with a nation. Now, they wouldn't allow us to go into the classroom and just speak about how great America is without any flaws at all, and that would be dishonest. We do have our flaws, just as individuals do. But why is it that they're okay with this fixation, this obsession of speaking about the dark side, but never the good things they want about America? Now, the problem is with them. Our nation's most vociferous extreme critics are the problem. It's not the nation, it's them.
Absolutely. Talking with Bill Donahue, our good friend, of course, Dr. Bill Donahue, sociologist, best-selling author, speaker, president of the wonderful Catholic League, as we are celebrating our nation's 250th anniversary this weekend. It's a Friday, July 3rd. Thank you so much for listening. Many of you may be getting ready for that weekend barbecue or having family over, and just remember to thank God for this great nation of ours, and maybe you'll be able to go to Mass today in addition, obviously, to this weekend. I can remember my Italian grandparents, and I'm 100% Italian, both sides all the way back, and being so proud to be able to bring family here, and some came very young, the others came a little bit older. They were my father's parents already married when they came over from Calabria, but they were so excited about living in America, so much so that they wanted all of their children and the grandchildren to speak English and to speak it well. They spoke Italian to each other, but it was so important for them to assimilate because they were so proud to be Americans and wanted to make a life for their families here. Not that they were ignoring their background as Italian Americans. We still had those or Italians. We still had those traditions, but they were so proud, Bill, of being able to have the opportunity to raise a family in America.
Well, it's interesting, too, and I very similar stories with my family, Irish, but it's very similar. I looked at a study here a couple of years ago on patriotism, and I wanted to find out who were the most likely to be patriotic and the least likely to be patriotic. And this one surprised me, but the most patriotic Americans by class now, by economic class, are the poorest of the poor. The poorest segment of American society. They are the most patriotic. Now, and the Democrats versus Republicans, the Democrats would be the least patriotic, Republicans the most. Young people, least patriotic. So that's because of what they're taught in the schools. But, it's interesting that the people who have benefited the most from America's bounty, the ones who are living a life of affluence, and they've college educated, and they have good jobs, and they're getting a good education, why are these people the most likely then to be the most hypercritical? We've been raising a nation of brats in some cases, not in all cases, but what exactly do they compare us to? You have to compare apples with apples. You don't compare apples with oranges, and that's what we've been doing. We've been comparing America to some pie-in-the-sky idea of the utopian society. They did that during the Enlightenment, back in the 17th century, and that creates nothing but problems. Obviously, when you compare any person or any nation to an ideal, you're going to find a gap. And so they make that, then that's the source of their anger. There's an American creed. Well, that's right. It takes a while before people can unfold. And by the way, history is loaded with people who were oppressed, and once they become and get in charge, guess what they do? They often become the new oppressor.
Yes.
So very few people come to the nation, get to the table with their hands clean. When I see that the Nation magazine, for example, has been around since the Civil War, and it's hammering America today. The Nation magazine was one of the greatest heroes they had in their history was a man by the name of Joseph Stalin, who killed people by the tens of millions in the Soviet Union. And they're going to lecture us in America about how we had slavery? No, we got rid of slavery in the 1860s. They didn't get rid of it in Africa until the 1980s, and it still exists in some places today, such as Mamdani's home country of Uganda and Ilhan Omar's home country of Somalia. Yeah, so for these people, they have the hubris, the gall, to lecture us. No, we don't need that from people who come to their hands with their hands so filthy as they do.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I can't believe we only have 3 minutes left. There's so many other questions I have for you. All right, let's talk a little bit before we wrap up about the report you did on the Washington's Valley Forge prayer.
Yeah, I saw a piece in NPR on the website saying that they're casting doubt on did Washington really pray in the woods, and he was kneeling and whatnot. So why are they so upset about this?
They just can't stand these images of people praying. I mean, it just drives them nuts.
No, it really does. It drives them crazy. And what if they found out he was praying for the unborn? Boy, they really would.
Oh, they'd
really
go off the deep end. Yeah.
But anyhow, just to cut to the quick, I looked at this. This is the professor in me. After I'm bashing the professors here once in a while, I do like to look at scholarship, and so I read this story and they're talking about a professor emeritus out of Notre Dame who's casting doubt on the early biographer of George Washington. All right, so he says that he concocted the story.
Oh, come on.
Concocted to fabricate it. So I looked at the evidence. The evidence was the footnote which drove you to one of his books. That was cute. And then I went to his book, and then I tried to search where did he get his information. And he cited 2 other books. So I got a hold of those 2 other books. And guess what? Nobody was able to disprove what a Quaker by the name of Potts said when he saw Washington praying on his knees in the woods, and this was confirmed also by a Princeton scholar who wrote about this situation. Now, all I'm saying is, wouldn't I trust people who are closer to the event back in the late 18th century,
right,
as opposed to people today in the 20th century who have an agenda?
Well, also, it's very simply called confirmation bias. They went out and looked for people who agreed with them and then said, oh, this is real, and tried to make it sound official because they were authors.
Right. But when they come out and they say that there is some truth to this claim, and into the images, and Washington did pray, though perhaps not that way. What do you mean, though perhaps? But no, that means perhaps he did. And there is some truth. What truth? You just told us it was concocted. You see, when you actually go ahead, and I've done this many times before, when you look at the original sources of the people that these people are quoting, they often don't match. Now, you would think an honest scholar would say, I can't cite that, because if somebody finds out it doesn't back up my wild-eyed conclusion, I'll look pretty stupid. I guess they assume nobody will check. I did. And guess what? They're the ones who come out looking pretty dark, quite frankly, to use that phrase again. No. They get so excited because they're trying to say that all these patriotic Americans are going to be singing God Bless America and whatnot. It upsets them. The problem, as I said before, Teresa, is them. It's not America. It's our nation's most vociferous critics.
Yep, but we say God bless America. Bill, happy 4th, and God bless you when you work at the Catholic League. We'll be right back. What's on your 4th of July menu for this weekend? I'd love to hear your ideas. Normally, what we would do, we are still here in Italy this weekend, but we would do your typical hamburgers, hot dogs, probably some nice chicken. But of course, we have to, we recognize all of our heritages, right? We'd have to have some Italian sausage on the grill with some peppers and onions and maybe some pasta salad. But whatever you do, enjoy it. Sit down with your family, praise God, and thank God for this incredible country. I just want to read a few more verses of the beautiful Battle Hymn of the Republic. Richard and I were talking about this song, how beautiful it is, this hymn. I have seen him in the watchfires of 100 circling camps. They have builded him an altar in the evening dews and damps. I can read his righteous sentence by the dim and flaring lamps. His day is marching on. He has sounded forth a trumpet that shall never call retreat. He is sifting out the hearts of men before his judgment seat. Oh, be swift, my soul, to answer him. Be jubilant, my feet. Our God is marching on. Indeed he is. Thank you, Jesus, and thank you especially for giving us so many great Catholic saints, past, and of course, so many people that we have presently, to thank them for all the great work that they've done to build our country. And we'll continue the conversation in hour number 2, brothers and sisters. Very excited about that. As I mentioned, Dr. Michael Breidenbach is going to be joining us. We are going to be taking a look at how we can celebrate both a birthday for our country and a history of religious liberty. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Carrie Gress joins us with theology of the home, patriotism this time around, including some great recipes. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And again, happy 4th of July weekend. This is July 3rd, 2026. Summer is flying by way too quickly. As I mentioned in the first hour of the program on a Friday, we have the day off today, so we are bringing you a very special 4th of July edition as we celebrate 250 years in this amazing country of ours. God bless America, and God bless the one holy Catholic and apostolic faith that has done so much for this country through its many saints that have come up through the many years, and also those people working hard in the church to help our country stay the great country that she truly is. Okay, so what are we going to be doing this hour number 2? Very excited to have Dr. Michael Breidenbach with us. We're going to be talking about America at 250 years. Can you believe it? Celebrating both our big birthday, and of course we know this weekend there's going to be all kinds of major celebrations in Washington and all over the country, and fireworks everywhere, so make sure you take some of that in, hopefully in person, and there'll be, I'm sure, a lot on the news as well. Taking a look at a big, giant birthday party, God bless America, and also, I would say even more importantly, is our history of religious liberty. Our country is so unique in terms of the founding fathers, what they did, which was totally influenced by God. You can just see it because the country is still working 250 years later, and there's nothing else like it in the world. Our country is very, very unique. So we'll talk about the great things that we can celebrate, our birthday party, and also the history of religious liberty in the first part of this hour here on EWTN Radio Extra. And then the same hour, we're going to wrap up with Dr. Breidenbach, and then we're going to be joined by Carrie Gress, and she's a theologian, she's an author, she's a speaker, and she does a great job of reminding us of the importance of the home. And in this particular case, her publication, her online publication, Theology of Home, has put out a beautiful, beautiful magazine, online magazine dedicated to patriotism and how you can celebrate this incredible, not just a weekend, but this birthday and this amazing history that we have in our country with your family in very detailed ways. All kinds of ideas to make sure, for example, that you are flying the flag correctly. All kinds of ideas on how to decorate your home for this weekend. All kinds of great recipes that you'll still have time to make because the 4th is tomorrow, and maybe you're having your picnic tomorrow afternoon or maybe even Sunday. So we are going to have 2 additional great discussions, as we did in the first hour of Catholic Connection, on this very special edition. And one of the things I always like to do on 4th of July or anything associated with the history of our country and patriotism is play John Philip Sousa music. And why is that? That's because when I was growing up, my father, who was a huge music buff, and I think I've mentioned it many, many times, that he was also a tremendous vocalist. He loved to sing, he loved to listen to music, and he loved being an American, very proud of his Italian heritage, but loved being American. And he would always play John Philip Sousa music and waking us up bright and early on 4th of July. Not a bad idea either. Let's get started on a Friday morning, and thanks for listening to hour number 2 of Catholic Connection on EWTN's Radio Extra. And we continue our discussion as we mark the 250th anniversary of our wonderful country, the United States of America, in this special edition of Catholic Connection. On Friday, July 3rd, heading into the beautiful 4th of July weekend. God bless America. Great to have a historian of American politics, religion, and law, Professor Dr. Michael Breidenbach. He's an historian of American religion, as I mentioned, politics, law, and culture. And he is Dean of the Honors College and Associate Professor of History at Ave Maria University. He is also a 2026 Visiting Research Scholar at Blackfriars Hall, University of Oxford, and a senior affiliate for legal humanities at the Program for Research on Religion and Urban Civil Society at the University of Pennsylvania. He's also an author, a noted speaker, and of course an expert on the topic of, again, history, politics, religion, and law, and he puts it all on one business card. Dr. Michael Breidenbach, great to have you on the program for this special edition of Catholic Connection. Lord, what are your thoughts? You have such a background, and this is such a perfect topic for you, looking at our history, especially as it relates to religious freedom and religion. What are your thoughts as we are celebrating the 250th anniversary of this amazing country of ours? Thanks for joining us.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks very much for inviting me. I'm happy to talk about the topic of America 250 and the Catholic influences on that important date, July 4th, 1776, when there was one Catholic signer of the Declaration of Independence, Charles Carroll of Carrollton, and his second cousin, Bishop John Carroll. And I think what really strikes me as we reflect on 250 years of the United States is the way in which Catholics were not just at the founding, but important influencers of the American founding. You know, it's incredible when you think of the long trail of anti-Catholic sentiment and even laws, to see, you know, these Catholics at the table of finalizing the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, framing the Constitution, passing laws in Maryland, where many Catholics were, that provided the safeguards of civil and religious liberty. So it's an extraordinary story, from being suspected subjects of an English king to trusted citizens in a new republic.
Doctor, do you think that more people in America are becoming aware, and you make so many excellent points in response to my first question this morning, that Catholics are not just at the table, but they were part of everything. They were not just sitting there, they were and didn't just view it, but they were very involved. Do you think most people, especially Catholics, realize that? Because there seems to be more of a Protestant take on 250 years.
If they're reading standard school textbooks on America's founding, Catholics, if they're recorded at all, are often relegated to a footnote. You know, most of the time when we think of founders, we think of Protestants or deists like Benjamin Franklin, or George Washington, who, you know, attended an Anglican service, but his religious convictions are a little bit more opaque. Thomas Jefferson, of course, who has what we might call a holy Bible, in which he actually cut out passages in the Bible in the New Testament because he didn't want any miracles in there. He didn't believe in them. Many times we think of the American founding as a Protestant one, different Protestant denominations. One of the things that really strikes me about American Catholic history, though, is the rich tapestry of Catholics from all over. We have Catholics from Central and South America coming to the United States. We have many Catholics coming from Europe. And of course, in later periods, we have people from all continents coming to the United States as Catholic. And one of the things that I think we'd do well to remember in this anniversary is the way in which Catholics participated not just in the founding, as we've been saying, but in all of American civic life. So Catholics fought for the American Revolutionary War. Catholics founded some of the most important charities in early America. They were missionaries. They participated in the building of schools. Many of the ways in which we understand Catholics contributing to American civil society today are really founded in this period. But again, if you were going to consult a standard, history textbook that you might find in high school, you wouldn't find very many instances of Catholics, or at least those that are not identified as such.
So how can we get the word out? Obviously, with programs like this, I know with your writings and your teachings. How about your students? Ave Maria University is a very faithful school. I know the founder very well, Tom Monahan. He and I go way back from Michigan. I know what that school's made of in terms of the quality of people like yourself and the great students. But what else can we do as Catholic Americans to help people understand the roots of this country and the connection to Catholicism, do you think?
Well, I think it starts at the Catholic school level. Those in parochial schools, independent Catholic schools, or homeschooling families, finding textbooks and books at appropriate age level that explain Catholic contributions to America. Ones that don't present hagiographies, right? I mean, we want a warts and all kind of history, I think, but one that takes a clear-eyed view of how Catholics shaped this country, that doesn't put halos where they're not needed, but one that gives us a very fair assessment of Catholic contributions. So that might start with Maryland. And if those, for listeners are in that area, there are so many wonderful Catholic sites in the early period in St. Mary's County, in the Baltimore Basilica, of course. These sort of public histories, these museums, these places that have been preserved. And if wherever you are in the United States, there have been Catholics. So, of course, if you're in California on the other coast, you have the missions. So, I think the more we take our families to these sites, the more we can tell them about our history. It starts with books as well. And of course, they're welcome to come to Ave Maria University, where they can take my class on American Catholic history.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking with Dr. Michael Breidenbach, Associate Professor and Chair of History, as he just mentioned, at Ave Maria University. His resume is very long and very impressive. We have about 3 minutes before the break, Michael. I'm just wondering, I'm sure because this is right up your alley, you've been following closely the work of the Religious Liberty Commission, and on Friday they just released their recommendations, 12 recommendations, and their report. I want to talk about this more when we come back, but initially we have about 2 minutes. What are your thoughts after the big press conference and all the talk about this on Friday? What do you think last week?
Well, as an historian and as a fellow American, I think one of the important interventions that this report offers is a reassessment of this phrase, separation of church and state.
Oh, thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. I can't wait to dive into it, but go ahead. I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Yeah, just at a high level. I mean, many times when we talk about the First Amendment, many people gloss that as creating a separation of church and state. And as that report noted accurately, that, of course, is not in the First Amendment text at all. It does not present itself as part of the drafting history of that amendment. We don't have all the records of what they said as they drafted it and debated it, but the records that we do have, that phrase has not come up. That phrase, of course, comes from a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to a group of Baptists, and his interpretation was that Religious Liberty America set up a church separation of church and state. But that, of course, is one founder's interpretation. I think a reassessment would look at the whole generating history of that First Amendment and a bigger picture of the history of religious liberty and church-state relations in America. And we would see, just at a basic level, that some states continued to have church establishments even after the First Amendment. It was considered to be a state's issue. States could or could not, depending on their laws and constitution, have a church establishment or not. Later on, of course, we have every state disestablishing their church. But what we really find, I think, in the First Amendment is a ringing endorsement of the right for people to worship in public. In other words, having churches that look like churches and being able to worship in those places of worship. That's what the Establishment Clause, it seems to me, rather the Religious Liberty Clause, Exercise Clause, seems to me doing. And
let's pick it up after the break. Let's continue our conversation with Dr. Michael Breidenbach. Having a very important conversation with Dr. Michael Breidenbach from Ave Maria University. He teaches on this topic of religion and history and politics and law, religious liberty. So it's just perfect as we move into the 4th of July. The big celebration has been underway for a while. The official day tomorrow, of course, the 4th of July. Happy early 4th of July to you. Michael, you were talking about the First Amendment, and sorry we got a little bit stepped on by the music there, but I wanted you to finish your thoughts regarding what was meant by the First Amendment with the Founding Fathers, do you think?
Well, as I was saying, Thomas Jefferson had this idea that we should have a separation of church and state, but other founders thought it was perfectly acceptable to have a church establishment, at least at the state level. No one agreed on a church establishment like the Church of England at the federal level, and that's what the First Amendment prohibits, of course. But states were allowed to do as they pleased, and so what we have instead of thinking of a separation of church and state as if this is a wall that cannot be, people cannot move from one side of the wall to the other, is rather a protection of religion, where we have churches being protected, as Thomas Jefferson himself said, to a group of Ursuline nuns in the Louisiana territory, basically, as long as you conform to U.S. law, we're going to protect you. We're going to make sure that you have everything you need in terms of what a government can provide in terms of safety and infrastructure and so on, for you to enact your charitable work. And so really this is, I think the First Amendment is a protection of religions for people to worship in the way that their conscience dictates, and a protection of incorporations of places of worship so that they can evangelize, so they can perform their sacred rites as they see fit. I think that's what the First Amendment is about. It is not about religion not going into politics. Religion contemplates morality, and politics is under the aspect of morality. So, of course, there's going to be a fruitful cooperation between people of faith and even places of worship, and the kind of decisions that conform to the common good of the United States.
And what did you think? Because one of the 12 recommendations from the commission that came out on Friday with their final report was really helping people understand. Number one was instruct the Department of Justice to issue guidance clarifying the proper understanding of the Establishment Clause and separation of church and state. Lieutenant Governor of Texas, Dan Patrick, stood up at the press conference last week and said that in all the interviews they've done, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but I'm just repeating it for our audience, in all the interviews, all the testimonies they heard, the majority of those witness testimonies, people who are persecuted for their faith, had the words, "You're violating the Constitution and a separation of church and state," thrown at them over and over and over again. To me, it's gone beyond. I mean, even the media, which is really, really pathetic if you think about it, insists that those words are in there, and they're supposed to be big supporters of the First Amendment. It's very frustrating. How did we get to this point where those words are always synonymous when we think of the First Amendment?
Well, there have been some Supreme Court decisions starting in the 20th century, and really it's the 20th century when the Supreme Court starts taking up in earnest First Amendment claims. We do have one in the 19th century, but most of them are at the state level. In the 20th century, we have the U.S. Supreme Court, frankly, going back and forth on this issue. There is a case in which a justice brings Thomas Jefferson's letter and says, look, this is what the First Amendment means.
But it's not what the First Amendment says. So does it get the confusion again?
Right. I think that justice's decision has a lot to do with the confusion. But of course, as you know, with Supreme Court cases and the decisions of the majority, they do go back and forth. And so you see this waxing and waning of decisions on church establishment issues, religious exercise issues. I think the current U.S. Supreme Court is much more amenable to this idea that this is not a straightforward separation of church and state interpretation. It's a much more nuanced view that I think we're getting from the Supreme Court. And I think what this new report from the Religious Liberty Commission is offering is a kind of synchrony with the current jurisprudence of the court. And so there seems to be some kind of alignment now in interpretation, but that long shadow of the church-state separation interpretation continues, as you say, in sort of common discourse and in journalism, and I hear it a lot actually among students, and so it does have a long half-life, but I think I'm hopeful going forward, especially with recent Supreme Court decisions, that this will be reinterpreted and then it'll flow to the way that we educate American citizens as well.
What do you think of the coverage that's been happening since the commission came out last week regarding their recommendations and whatnot? Some of the reports I read the weekend after it came out last weekend, I was, my Italian really got up. I'm reading these stories and how the reporters write them. They just don't even understand, Doctor, the basics of the First Amendment. They're claiming that Trump wants to rewrite the Establishment Clause and get rid of a separation of church and state. And they even say, in many, many reports that I've read, as described in the First Amendment. And as we mentioned earlier, inferring that the words are in there. So there's such a lack of understanding about the people who are giving us this information. What's your response to some of the media coverage you've seen so far?
Well, I think, constitutional interpretation is first and foremost born by the highest court in our land, the U.S. Supreme Court. So these kind of judicial determinations should come from the U.S. Supreme Court. They don't come from, journalist reporting desks. They don't even come from professors' chairs. They come from the people that we entrust in the judiciary branch and in the lower courts. And so, I think what we can be helpful is the way in which, scholars and historians can take a look at this, original history and see that, yes, there were some people who wanted a very strict separation of church and state. And what they meant by that is something like, churches and places of worship and ecclesiastical leaders should not have an outsized influence in politics. The reality is, of course, though, that when you look at in the Catholic story, there was a priest in the Michigan territory who was a missionary, and he was elected as a non-voting representative in U.S. Congress. And there was some tension there because the canon law at the time suggested that these priests should not be in legislative branches. And certain Protestant denominations likewise had prohibitions on ministers being elected office holders. So already there were, within the internal disciplines of religions that you don't want to mix it too much, right? You don't want a bishop becoming, a senator. But at the same time, you do want a bishop talking with senators.
Right.
You do want Catholics voting and influencing policies. And what we have right now are a lot of Catholics in all branches of government, and that is fine. There are many people of other faiths and some of none at all who are trying to influence American politics, and that's what our republic is about. So I think trusting in citizens to want the common good can do a long way to ameliorate some of these fears. I think the separation of church and state mantra is really one out of fear. I think it's people fearing that religions will have an outsized influence on politics, that certain, clerics will start amassing power. And, there were times in history where that happened. But in this case, I think a lot of this has to do with fear of sort of an imposition of a certain kind of morality. And I think everyone is trying to influence what they think the common good is.
Yeah.
We have a space for that. Let's debate it. Let's have civil discourse.
Michael, we're out of time, unfortunately, but I want to encourage people to go to your website, michaelbreidenbach.com, for more fascinating information about this topic. We'll be right back. It's a Thursday. Great to have Carrie Gress, editor of Theology of Home, a beautiful online magazine and ministry. She is a scholar at the Institute for Human Ecology at Catholic University of America, author, speaker, and just an amazing on-fire fellow sister in the Lord. And she's got some great ideas, speaking of home, for America's 250th birthday. Summer ideas for the family. Hey, how are you, my dear? What's going on?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good. Mm-hmm. Okay, so give us some ideas. Let's start off with, because there's so much out there. We're hearing so much about the anniversary.
Sure.
And I'm sure there's lots of secular things we can do. But how do we help our families connect the beautiful history of our country to Catholicism?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked. This is one of the things I've been working on at Theology of Home is a kind of guide for the America 250. We have done guides in the past. We did an Advent guide, a Thanksgiving guide, a Christmas guide, winter guide, even an Easter guide. And so it just seemed like this was just ripe for it. And, I think you can go to this sort of superficial level of apple pie and baseball and that kind of thing, but we wanted to go a little bit deeper with it. So I think the amazing thing about it is obviously when you have 250 years, you have so much history to go into, and even just the real palpable faith of the founding fathers, of the Revolutionary War, aspects of the Civil War, and then of course just the American vision that's connected to the church. Most people don't realize that the Mississippi River was initially called the Immaculate Conception River, and all of those kind of amazing details, and of course the Basilica, the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception that you were just talking about. So I think that there's there's so much that we can look to that goes beyond the superficial, just merely flag waving and fireworks. I think we can go a lot deeper in honoring the history of the United States and really teach our children about that. And that's what we're trying to do with the guide, is highlight some of these, this remarkable intersection between American history and the church, and what it is that God has done in this country.
Well, I'm looking at the cover of the guide, which is beautiful. It's entitled Indivisible. So tell us about it.
Yeah, so this is just it's like a regular magazine. It'll be online on the 14th of June and available. And it's one of those fun platforms that it makes you really feel like you're flipping pages. You can actually hear the page flip with it. But yeah, it's got prayers. It's got everything from how to take care of a flag. We've got recipes. We've got a lot of history. We did some deep dives into even something as ordinary as the teddy bear. I have become a huge fan of Theodore Roosevelt, and he is the one who that's where the idea came from, was the teddy bear. And he had gone hunting, and everybody else got a bear. He was in Mississippi. Everybody else shot their bear, and one of his aides tied a bear up to a tree and told him to shoot it. And he said, absolutely not. I'm, so unsportsmanlike. I'm not going to shoot it. And this made it into the press. And that's really where someone came up with the idea of making the teddy bear. And then, of course, nearly a century later, you've got Ralph Lauren, who's immortalized the teddy bear in our clothing and all of that. So it was really fun to pull that history together and to connect it with something contemporary that's, really feels on trend, like Ralph Lauren at the moment. So yeah, it's really just a whole array of things for entertaining and inspiration. There's even a playlist of American music that we've put together that can be great for an outdoor barbecue or just your own, prepping. And, the best thing about those playlists is once you have them for kind of an event like that, then it's just a really great memory bank. I know I've done that with my own children. When we travel, we put together a playlist, and then it just ends up becoming kind of this deep memory of our time together, and that they're going to go back to in the future and recall those really beautiful and happy days as a family together.
And you have a beautiful prayer from Mother Angelica as well.
We do. We know Mother Angelica is obviously interceding for our country and certainly for our mission at Theology of Home. So it's always great to include her.
Well, I think, can I read that for our listeners? Because it's really beautiful.
Please do. Yeah.
Lord God, I ask in all humility that you bless this country as unworthy as we are. Protect it from every evil. Protect it from the enemy. Protect it, Lord, that it may accomplish thy will and keep thy commandments. I ask, Lord, with a pleading heart to look down upon us in our unworthiness. Give this country a renewal of devotion to you, your law, and commandments. Let us be once more a country under you, Lord. Amen. Mother Angelica. Amen. That's beautiful. Where'd you find that?
I don't know where Emily found it. Emily Malloy has been, she's really the design genius behind all of this. I don't even know how she does this. She makes, I just give her some ideas and we pull some things together, and then she just works this magic and makes these incredibly beautiful guides. And she's the one that came up with that prayer. So it'd be really fun to proliferate that and make it available for people. That's something for us to think about doing on our blog.
I love the recipe factor because I think cooking with your children, with your family, my husband and I love to cook, and we do it together all the time. I think that's extremely bonding for people.
It is. And it's that same thing like music. It's tactile and it builds in memories, and you've got it in your taste buds. Really, you remember the flavor of your berry cobbler, or of corn on the cob, and all of those staples that we tend to serve on the 4th of July.
Do you have a favorite recipe that you like to make with your family?
Let's see. We love to barbecue steak. That's sort of our big thing. Is certainly grilling. And I think our go-to, I hate to say it, it's so cliche, but it really is a favorite, chocolate chip cookies. We have this great recipe that it uses malted milk in it from the Pioneer Woman that I've been making for years, and I could probably make it in my sleep. It's just outrageously good. That and apple cake is another family favorite too.
And my aunt used to make apple cake.
That's
very,
German apple
very
cake.
Good. It's very moist.
It's
you're
really
making me
moist.
hungry. That's my fault.
Good.
I asked the question.
No, I think that's good.
No, it's really fun though. What I love about this is some of the old photos. Like I'm looking at page 6. Now, I'm older than you, I'm sure, but I mean that old ad with Pendleton. I remember Pendleton, that designer.
Yeah.
Very American.
So there's a great story behind Pendleton. I grew up in Oregon, and Pendleton is housed there. It actually originally started over a century ago in Pennsylvania, and then the founder moved out to Oregon, and they made these wool shirts that were called board shirts. And the Beach Brothers actually wore them. And the Beach Brothers were actually originally called the Pendletons because of those shirts. And then someone wisely made them change their name to the Beach Boys, which obviously is a much more all-American California ring to it. And I'm certain is part of their success. But very few people know that. And you can still get those gorgeous blankets. They have a whole line of blankets and socks and pillows and everything they're all related to the national parks. So it's a really fun way to integrate the national parks into your decor and to feel like it's got this connected sense of history. And of course, the national parks came from Theodore Roosevelt. I think there's a real theme here. A lot of things go back to Teddy Roosevelt in this guide.
Well, we'll talk more about it. It's absolutely beautiful, and find out how people can get their hands on it. They can read it online and flip through it. It flips like a real magazine, as Carrie said. Carrie Gress is with us. We're talking about a guide for theology of the home in anticipation of our 250th anniversary. She's on campus to tape with Johnette for a number of shows, actually for 5 days. We'll be right back. Carrie Gress is with us. Of course, she's with Theology of the Home, and she is in studio. And she's taping this week with the sweet and beautiful and lovely and amazing Janet Williams for a number of different programs. Again, as we celebrate our 250th anniversary, providing us with a beautiful guide, an online guide that is stunning in terms of the photos and the information, the recipes and activities for the home. And Carrie, I want to mention, we were talking about this during the break, with all the people out there who have just horribly desecrated the flag of the United States of America. Thank you for putting in flag etiquette in this.
Yeah, again, that was Emily's idea, but we have a flag at my home, and we are really conscientious about taking care of it. And I think that most people aren't really even aware that there is etiquette behind it. So, yeah, that seemed like a really important thing for us to just start being mindful of again. And another great way to, something we can pass along to our children is that kind of respect for the flag.
And that's something they can remember as they get older, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, remember saying the pledge every morning at school, and it was just part of your morning routine of getting ready for school. So I know so many of us know it, but it doesn't seem like something that's being passed on readily at this stage.
So I just want to go over, I'll read some of these and you can comment, but this is wonderful that you have these different points in here regarding displaying the flag correctly. So the flag should be raised briskly and lowered ceremoniously, never touching the ground at any time. I love this because it shows such respect.
Yeah. No, without a doubt, that seems to be the key piece. This isn't just some other decoration in our yard, that it really has a deep significance that I think needs to resonate with us and needs to be treated with respect because of that.
Display the flag from sunrise to sunset. If it is flown overnight, always provide suitable illumination such as outdoor lighting or solar spotlights.
Isn't that great? I mean,
Yes.
think about having a specific light on the flag in your yard, and just I think so that people can see it at night all the time too. I think that's really just a beautiful, a suggestion in terms of devotion, but also in terms of the aesthetic of it, which sounds really superficial, but I think is actually really important if when people are coming to your house or driving by your house after it's dark.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. On buildings, a flag should hang with the Union blue field and stars at the peak when on a pole or uppermost to the observer's left when displayed flat. This is, I think, very helpful because many people want to display the flag, especially when we get closer to 4th of July. But knowing this and how it's done, I think, is a great witness.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right.
Let's do these last two because I think it's really important to throw this out there. Maybe people don't know. Maybe they haven't heard this before. In a group of flags, the U.S. flag should be in the position of honor, highest or at the center and front, and never display the flag in a way that could allow it to touch anything below, especially the ground, water, or any objects. And I love the image of this giant flag on a barn in the countryside.
Yeah. It's great, isn't it? Yeah. And I think the other thing that's really important is just disposal of a flag when it's when it's worn out. My town has its own place in City Hall where you can go and leave flags that have been used and loved, and they will take care of them in a dignified manner. So, I'm sure there are probably more than just my town, places that do that.
One of the things my father would always do, my father loved music. He actually was a vocalist. He had a beautiful Italian tenor voice. He loved all music, especially the opera, but he loved a lot of the historic and the very, very patriotic music and John Philip Sousa. 4th of July, we would always wake up to John Philip Sousa.
That's beautiful.
And that music, the marches, the famous marches. And that has stuck with me and just reminds me of our country. He was very proud, even though, of course, his heritage is Italian, but he was very, very proud of. He had served in the military, served in the Merchant Marines for many years, but he was very proud of America and
I love that.
Wanted to pass that on to us.
Yeah, we might have to include that. Add him to the playlist. He might already be there. Emily's been the mastermind behind that playlist, and she's covered a lot of ground. But I like that idea. We might have to tell that story.
So is this available now, this beautiful online guide?
It's not. It's going to be out on Flag Day on Sunday, June 14th. And it'll be available at theologyofhome.substack.com. We'll have it pinned to the top of the website so that people can get to it really easily.
Okay, so Fulton Sheen is also in this.
Fulton, right? You can't have a 250 America 250 guide and not have Fulton Sheen in it. So he will be in it. We're going to be including some reflections about him. We also are including some different books that Matt Meehan's book just came out with Sophia Press, The American Fables, and I went to his book release a couple of weeks ago and was just utterly transformed by it. I can't wait to get my hands on the book. I've got a copy in the mail. So we're going to be adding that because I think he just does an incredible job of offering American fables in a way that appeals to all age groups and makes it accessible. So I'm looking forward to adding some of that into this. But we've got just a whole array of different things in this guide.
I think it's great. It's beautifully done. So congrats on this. Take us back to why you started this whole idea of helping people focus more on the home.
Yeah, it was funny. The idea of Theology of Home came to me on my treadmill one afternoon because I realized, my goal as a mother is that I want to get my husband, my children, and everybody that I love home to heaven. Like that's the goal. And that our physical homes are actually the means through which we do that. They're meant to be really a foretaste of heaven. But there's also there's that desire, and it's not just among Catholics or Christians. It's this universal desire to make our homes some kind of a sanctuary. And that's, I think that's God's sleight of hand saying, what you're really longing for is heaven, but I'm going to allow you to just have a little taste of it here. And that's why the home is so important. That's why we spend billions of dollars on home renovations and decor and, throw pillows. And so I think there's something to this human, the longing of the human heart. But of course, we have to have that properly ordered. And then, of course, you mix that with what's happened with the feminist movement that's really denigrated the home and made it something that, is just unimportant, or is just more of a show place or even a hotel where people just sleep for the night and maybe have a meal or two, but aren't really becoming a family and getting to know one another and allowing children to become who it is that they're meant to be. So all of that was really packed into the early vision. And of course, 4 books later and our blog, we've, we're still moving.
What's the main website in case people aren't familiar with it or haven't seen it yet?
The easiest place to go is just theologyofhome.com, and that will then take you. We have a mercantile, so we have a whole line of lifestyle products. And then we also have the blog that has it goes out every morning. I cultivate and curate 8 different articles of things that I think Catholic women are going to be interested in, and Catholic men too. We have a lot of men who read Theology of Home, but it's things like theology and philosophy, but it's art and travel and recipes and just amazing things that I find fascinating around the internet that I think people would really enjoy and add to the richness of their lives. And so that goes out Monday through Friday, 50 weeks out of the year. So we love to have people join us there and really be edified by that.
Do you think the attitude toward the home is changing? I mean, I sense that. I really do.
Yeah. No, I think you're dead on about that. I think there's a huge shift happening. Younger women in particular are really drawn to it. I think they've experienced that sort of vapid home and the idea of, just the girl boss, and they're really rejecting it. And they want something deeper. They want real relationships. They want something rich. They want something tactile and tangible. And that's the beauty of cooking for people and caring for people and gardening and, all of those things that happen in the home. That's what I think they're longing for. And so it's one of these things. We started this, like 2017 maybe, and then COVID hit shortly after the first Theology of Home came out, and so it was just really timely. You can see the Holy Spirit just planting seeds and helping people kind of get this straight, because there was such a long period when people just felt like, okay, the home is just superficial and vain, and it's just about decorating. But I think there's just so much more to it, and so that's one of our goals, is to show the deep theology that's there, that's really meant for us to live and get our families, ultimately to the home that we all long for.
Yeah, I find it fascinating. And there is a story that broke a couple of weeks ago, and I was interviewed in Secular Media on this because of my books on Italy. But there's a new trend. You've probably heard about it. It's called Nona Maxing. Have you heard about it?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and it's all about getting back to basics. It's mainly, I think is it Gen Zers that are tying into this, but a lot of people are picking up on it, having to do with they want the comfort of home, and Nona, being the grandmother, and they want to be in the home with grandma, making a real meal from scratch.
Yeah, right. It's amazing. But it shouldn't surprise us. I think we've had the opposite for so long, that people are really hungry for that experience of the concept to the execution that we haven't had, because we've been given so many shortcuts, and it's just there's something part of that process of caring for others and really putting yourself into a loving meal. I think people can taste the difference, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in terms of what else we can do, we have this beautiful guide from you in this website. What else did you suggest as we move into this very important anniversary of our country for families? I
mean, I think one thing, there's obvious things like, bunting and fireworks, but I think one thing that my family's going to do is I'm going to go with my kids and pick out maybe kind of a different, maybe fruit tree, maybe a fig tree, maybe an apple tree. Probably seems appropriate. I actually live in the town where George Washington was born, so the famous apple tree that he supposedly chopped down fell in that town. But something that you can plant a seed and then watch it grow, and it's tied to those memories. and they can experience it over the years and you have this memory that goes back to something earlier. And, it doesn't have to be something so dramatic, but I think you could also even just do a potted plant or something that can actually, children can watch grow. Because even that experience of watching a seed grow into something bigger, I think is always mind-blowing for those of us who are, in this very sterile, technical world. So things like that. Arranging flowers, obviously, is always a perennial thing in a very easy way, especially places like Trader Joe's have great bouquets for very inexpensive, and those can be broken up and go a long way in decorating the home.
What about reading patriotic stories, sharing that with children?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really incredible idea, and that's really what I was drawn to with Matt Meehan's book, is that there are so many great stories in that. I think there's so many resources now. My kids were really into Liberty's Kids, which is all about the Revolutionary War, and it was kind of amazing. At 6 years old, they knew a lot more about the Revolutionary War than I did, and I kind of learned by osmosis. In fact, it was funny because I finally watched it because I had only heard it in our car, and I was like, oh, that's what those characters look like in this video. So I think that's the great thing, is there's so many different resources now for children to learn about the history of both the Revolutionary War and the Civil War and the Founding Fathers. The Ken Burns series is always a classic about the Civil War that I think people would really enjoy as well. So it's those kinds of things that families can do together to learn together that's going to bring it to life and add real richness in people's memories and experiences.
Well, you're a gem. Thank you for all that you do and speaking the truth in love, and for what you offer, not only for families, but for women especially, to truly embrace their faith. Once again, Carrie, for the new guide, when will it hit the online sources?
It drops in June 14th.
Great. Thanks, my dear. God bless. And have fun with Jeanette. Give her a hug for me.
Will do.
Okay.
Take care.
We'll be right back on Catholic Connection on a Thursday morning to let you know what's coming up on Friday. Again, wishing you a beautiful Friday and a beautiful weekend as we celebrate our nation's 250th birthday. Hope you have a safe weekend, and what a great opportunity to be with loved ones and friends and go to Mass, and again, thank God on our knees for this great country of ours. And I hope you also enjoyed our interviews. We took a very patriotic approach, as you noticed, with our interviews in the first hour, including Dr. Bill Donahue, and also the second hour with Dr. Breidenbach and Carrie Gress, and our ideas for how to be patriotic at home. And so many beautiful details. I don't know if you noticed how she was talking about the different steps that we have to take when we are hanging the American flag out of sheer respect. I thought that was so amazing and incredible. And all these little insider tips of which we may not be aware. So take a look again at Theology of Home with Carrie Gress, and wishing you a beautiful weekend as we close this very special edition on the 4th of July weekend here at EWTN. Thank you again for your listenership. We thank God for all of you, and we are wishing you a safe and a lovely weekend, and a fun weekend too. Have a great time. Watch some fireworks. Go splashing around in the pool or at the beach. And thank God for every single gift that we have. A little more history as we wrap up. I started the show by talking about the beautiful Battle Hymn of the Republic. It's an American patriotic song, a little background, written by abolitionist writer Julia Ward Howe during the American Civil War. It's even sometimes called "Mine Eyes Have Seen the Glory of the Coming of the Lord." Take a look at that song this weekend and really take in those verses, and also play it loudly and proudly. Happy birthday, America. And we'll talk to you on a Monday. Have a great weekend.